All right, next we are going to hear from Zach Rossetti. He's an associate professor of special education in the Wheelock College of Education and Human Development at Boston University, a former elementary school special education teacher and inclusion facilitator from New Hampshire. Dr. Rossetti's research focuses on the experience of families with children with disabilities by centering on family engagement in schools and communities, sibling roles and relationships, and family school partnerships of culturally and linguistically diverse families. His research also examines social interactions and friendships between students with and without disabilities, specifically the context and dynamics of such relationships and how educators and families may facilitate social opportunities. So, Zach, I am going to turn it over to you, but I was just curious if the people on the line would want to chat in how many children they actually do have. If they have more than one child, feel free to type that in just so we can kind of get an idea. But I will go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Yeah, please do write in the chat there. That will be helpful. I'm really excited to be here. I could talk forever about my family, my brother Todd in particular. So I'll jump right into this. Let me share my screen. I'm going to share some of the research on sibling experiences, as well as my own personal experiences. And I'll stop in time to have some questions at the end. I come from, in my teaching background, and now as an associate professor at BU, as Nicole said in the introduction, from a focus on intellectual and developmental disabilities. Which is much broader than muscular dystrophy, neuromuscular, but includes many, I think, commonalities. And I'd be happy to talk about some of the differences as well in the questions. I am the oldest. I have to ground this in my family. As I said, I'm the oldest of 6 in my family. There were 3 of us within 4 years, and then a 3-year gap, and then my brother Todd, who you can see in the center of these pictures in his wheelchair. And it's really uncanny. He's in the center of most pictures, which reflects his central role in our family, I believe. There was another 3 years, and then my youngest brother, and then my parents divorced and remarried, and my mom and stepfather had my sister Mariah. So that's the 6. I have unique relationships with all of them. I love all of them. And in many ways, well, I'll come back to my relationship with Todd in a sec, but let me introduce Todd. Todd was a huge Boston Red Sox fan. Being from New Hampshire, we loved Boston teams. He loved the Red Sox the most. He absolutely loved chocolate cake, huge sweet tooth, was very social. And that he was so outgoing and social was even more impressive because he did not speak. He used a wheelchair, as you can see, and he needed support throughout his day due to cerebral palsy. If one of my jobs in the summer and fall when we were outside was to be on bug duty, bees or mosquitoes. If they landed on him, he obviously could see them and didn't like the situation, I imagine, but he couldn't physically move his body to wipe it off. And he's had some nasty stings and mosquito bites and whatnot. So that was a job. One of the things I realized early on was that many people outside of our family didn't view Todd the way that we did within our family. Communicating and connecting with others without speaking was one of many lessons that he taught me. And I just feel so privileged that he's my brother. I was probably the closest with Todd out of all my siblings. I was the oldest, so I did the lion's share of caregiving. but we always had a strong connection. It probably grew out of that a little bit. I learned to advocate at an early age. I remember some kids. I'm 7 years older than him, so I probably, I don't know, early teenager, 12. I don't know. We were at Canopy Lake, and I saw some kids kind of mocking his kind of rigid movements, and I yelled at them, kind of swore at them. What the f are you doing? And they started coming towards us, and so I flipped his wheelchair around and ran back to our mother. But that was one of my earliest memories of advocating and sticking up for him. When we were all hanging out at home, if everyone ran to another room because they could run to another room quickly, I was always the one who said, "Hey, come back here," or would just like push Todd really quickly to keep up with everyone, or carry him out of his wheelchair upstairs, or go swimming, things like that. And other than our mother, whenever he saw me, he became most animated and excited and happy. Um, Central to how I think of the sibling relationship is kind of captured by the story of when I went sledding with Todd for the first time. We're from New Hampshire. I was probably 13 or 14. He was 6 or 7. We were alone, which was uncommon in our large family, but we were alone in the winter one afternoon, and I asked him if he had gone sledding. And when he gets excited, as I said, he kind of waves his arms and stands up in his wheelchair, and he did that. And I said, "All right, we're going sledding." So I bundled him up, and kind of we walked outside, and I almost dropped him because of his startle reflex when he hit the cold air. And so I put him in the sled with his permission, and pulled him up to the top of the hill. This was not the hill, but it's a pretty good representation of the hill in our backyard. So I sat him in the sled in front of me. I asked him if he was ready to go, and he got so excited again. And that's when I learned a very important lesson: not to be too close, because he kind of gave me a little back headbutt. But we pushed off sledding, started slowly, and then picked up speed. And I still, it's so funny to this day. I remember the snapshot moment of like sledding fast, starting to get a little nervous at how fast we were going, but just thinking to myself, this is amazing. And how have we not done it before? But like I said, we started going fast, and then I noticed ahead of us, our other brothers must have built a little jump the day before. And I tried to steer out of the way, and couldn't get totally out of the way. So we hit the side of this jump, got some air, and tipped over, and I landed on top of him, and rolled over. And he can't control his body, so he was stuck in the snow still, and I could see his shoulders heaving. And I rolled him over, and I saw tears, and I saw some blood on his lip, and I just thought, this is not good. And so I wiped off the lip with some snow, and rushed him inside. And by the time we got inside, how'd we fall this way? So his right eyebrow, right above his eye, started to swell up. So I got a washcloth and ice and put some on there, put him back in his wheelchair, and was icing that. And I heard our mom come back from shopping, and I was a teenager. I was 14. And I shouldn't have been as scared as I was, but I was petrified. I ran over to her when she walked in, and I just yelled, I yelled out, "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. We went sledding and crashed, and Todd got hurt. I think he's okay. I'm so sorry." And she she walked past me without saying anything to see Todd. And now, as a parent, I know she was probably just wanting to see if he was okay. So she went into the room, and she asked him if he went sledding. And he got all excited and laughed, and she started to walk away, and she turned back, and I'll never forget this, and she said to me, "Don't ever be sorry for being a brother." And then she started to walk away, and I was just like knocked over. And then she turned back again, and she said, "Just don't fall next time." And I had internalized that message. Todd was always Todd. We were close. From an early age, um, he was Todd first. He was my brother first, not my disabled brother. But his visible injuries, the lip, which was fine, the eye, which was less fine, but over time it was fine, challenged that for me. It really did. And my mother's words were a powerful reminder that Todd was my brother, and I can and should act like that as much as possible, and within the appropriate precautions. With her saying, "Just don't fall next time." So there she is. Uh, so I also come here today as a board member of the National Sibling Leadership Network. So I wanted to point that out early on. I'm the chair of the research committee for the Sibling Leadership Network. Many states, not all, but many have chapters. I'm also on the board or actually the co-president of the board for the Massachusetts chapter. And both the National Sibling Leadership Network and the Massachusetts chapter have lots of resources for siblings and about siblings on their web pages. The SLN they have their conference every other year in collaboration with the American Association on Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. So the conference this year is virtual. It's going to happen on June 18th and 19th. I wanted to point that out. And there's information at the website, siblingleadership.org. So let's get into some of the research here. The emphasis here, why we're focusing on siblings, really hinges on a couple of facts that have intensified over the last decade or two. Siblings often have the longest life relationship, can be 20 plus years longer than parents. And especially in the IDD world, many individuals with disabilities and impairments are living longer. Over 3/4 of people with IDD live at home with aging or elderly caregivers. And so siblings are getting involved more and more. And not to be Debbie Downer too much, but anything can happen to any of us at any time. So if anything happens to those of you who are parents in the room, I am sure those of you with more than one child, your other children or child would, assume they'd be involved or would step up in a situation. Relationships are similar to those we have with other siblings, but with unique circumstances that you'll see on the coming slides. Siblings are often the first social partners and can provide a continuum of support and information. And even though we are being called on as the next generation of caregivers and advocates and often want to step into those roles, we're often not prepared for those roles. I became a special ed teacher. Now I'm a professor, associate professor with tenure, doing research in this area. I thought I knew everything about disability and my brother Todd. And when I started in the summers to spend 2 weeks with him, just the two of us, so our mom could go on her one vacation of the year with our stepfather, I realized I didn't know the day-to-day like she did. We don't live and breathe it like parents do. So we need information, we need preparation in order to step into these roles. Before going too much farther with the research, I should point out, I'm still good for time. I want to point out a lot of the early research in the 60s, 70s, and 80s had a pessimistic view about the sibling experience and reflected the kind of assumption in many ways, I think, guided the research to focus on negative outcomes and poor adjustment of siblings without disabilities. Greater risk for negative outcomes, et cetera. there's been a shift, and an important shift recently, that acknowledges positive opportunities, and shows that generally relationships between siblings with and without disabilities are characterized as being positive generally and with frequent contact. Um, Most of the recent studies indicate that siblings of adults with IDD have good health and low depression, and report many rewards of having a sibling with disabilities. And lastly, I want to point out the sibling experience varies in widely, depending on unique factors within each family. So everyone has, and every individual, every sibling, and every family has a different experience. So please, these are kind of general findings that may or may not apply. Not everything we see here is going to hold true, and that's okay. So there are unique concerns that we have. And, I think the embarrassment related to, certain differences that are obvious and apparent at different ages for younger kids in particular, or maybe going through middle school moments, those are natural feelings. It's important to process those. Kids, siblings look to their parents for how to deal with it, but we also don't want to feel badly on top of having these emotions for having these emotions is one of the key takeaways. So processing it, talking about impairment and disability and kind of progressive changes, all of that is really important and key. But one of the important aspects of the sibling research is that what we feel is what we feel. So kind of approaching it neutrally as much as possible is helpful. It is natural that there's increased responsibility in caregiving roles, and there are some drawbacks to that. Children, younger siblings may be parentified. Siblings who are younger than their brother with neuromuscular, or a sister, but mostly brothers in some cases, may experience that shift to a asymmetrical sibling relationship, right? If they're younger, but then as things progress and as they get older, they might take on an older sibling role, and even though in terms of providing assistance. And so, there can be some concerns around that, and processing that, and certainly fears for the future. How is this going to change? When are things going to change? I knew too much. Some people like to know things. I knew too much, and I knew that because of my brother's CP and his comorbid symptoms, that his mortality was kind of in the 30 to 35 years old range. He needed a G-tube the last couple of years of his life due to some difficulties with aspiration. He had spastic quadriplegia and been in a wheelchair his entire life and needed lots of support, this and that. And he outlived that by 4 years. He died a couple of years ago when he was 39. My siblings, I kept asking them, do you want to know some of the things I know? And they didn't. So, but they were still concerned too. And especially as he started going through some health difficulties as he aged. There are also unique and wonderful opportunities. Many siblings are thought to develop, and we do, maturity before our peers, empathy, appreciation for diversity, differences of all kinds, and we do, and these are some of the benefits, advocacy skills and strength. And one of the reasons that we want to kind of process some of the feelings in situations that were on the other slide is because we want to have siblings lean into these unique opportunities more than have some of the negative outcomes of concerns that aren't dealt with. We don't want siblings to automatically assume the role of caregiver when they enter new relationships, peers, romantic relationships as teenagers and adults. We want siblings to know especially those, of brothers or sisters with behavioral problems or difficulties, that it's not acceptable to be treated poorly by someone who loves them. Things like that. So the reason for dealing with some of those in a neutral way helps us to lean more into those unique opportunities. Some specific research related to Duchenne muscular dystrophy. I pulled a few sibling voices. There are common themes, and one of the common themes, I think, is related in the first quote there. Parents might assume things are difficult, or wonder, how are we dealing with this? And many times it's all we've known. So siblings do tend to be more resilient, and get used to our routines and our lives. And there might be some resentment at times when we always have to help out in the caregiving, or leave early for events to ensure that our brothers or sisters are taken care of, and able to get in the accessible van with us, or things like that. But for the most part, we're used to it. One of the things we feel, and you can see it in the middle and last quote, is that sense of guilt. So there's responsibility. I'll go out if someone's at home, as this sibling says. But then you also do feel that sense of guilt sometimes. Like, should I have stayed home with my brother or sister? Should I have done something that they could have come to? Where do you draw that line of family life and my own individual life? And parents can help siblings figure that out in their own way within their family and individual preferences. And then there are specific feelings related to the specific situation of one's brother or sister, and thinking, I'm playing hockey, I'm going skiing, I'm able to be in this and go out with my friends, and my brother doesn't seem to do that, or can't do that, and I feel guilty about that at times. So how can parents help? I think the research shows, and I think two of the things I want to point out, that the attitudes and actions of parents and caregivers towards their child with a disability impacts how we as siblings relate to our brothers or sisters. If we're able to, the more accepting that parents are of that individual, what needs to be done to accommodate their disability or impairments, the more that siblings follow their lead. And the attitude and actions of parents towards us as siblings also helps us. If parents can acknowledge the unique role and responsibility of being a sibling, and appreciate the complexities, the ups and downs. Yes, we still love them unconditionally, even if we get upset in the moment or one day. Can better assist us in coming to terms and kind of accepting that role. And one of the best ways to do that is through that kind of neutral discussions. I think being available for questions if we have them. I had a lot of questions I never asked because I didn't want to burden my mom. She already seemed to be doing a lot with my brother. So maybe, within whatever you can do to the best of your ability as parents, having some routine one-on-one time, whether it's weekly or monthly even, that is just with each of the other children as a sibling. It's hard to ask questions for some kids, for some even, teenagers and young adults, but knowing that we have that kind of consistent time, maybe they'll come out during those moments. Having that consistent time, even if it's just once a month, makes up for the recognition of, they're spending a lot of time with Todd or and not me. and I feel badly about that, or I wish it was different, it can really go a long way. I remember I was home from college because I couldn't afford the tuition one semester, so I was home working, and I happened to turn 21 that during that time. And my mom and I, who were butting heads a lot during that time, I remember to this day, she made sure to take me out on my 21st birthday, even though I was getting together with friends to have a quick drink, just the two of us, and just kind of talk about things. And we talked about college, and we talked about Todd, and it was just a quick 20 minutes because we had to get back for Todd, but it was wonderful. Her approach in our lives was that um, Todd would do what we did, and we'd figure it out, and us as siblings had to help out. She was a force of nature that way. She didn't talk about his disability. I was a special ed teacher, and I didn't really know. I kind of figured out, but I didn't really know by name that he had spastic quadriplegia, cerebral palsy, that he was born typically, so he's one of the kind of smaller percentage who had an acquired disability during his first year of life due to seizures, and that was just how she dealt with it. That worked, I guess, for us. I had questions. Other approaches obviously would be to kind of talk about it in developmentally appropriate ways, with your children, but that's what worked for her. She just kind of focused on what needed to be done, and there was that expectation. I wish, back then they didn't have those mats that a lot of beaches have now in the big wheels on the wheelchairs. So we carried Todd's wheelchair to many a beach when we were younger to get there, because she liked the beach, and even though he overheated, he liked the beach. So there's more accessibility now, which is great. The equipment, the wheelchairs are better, which is great. The other part of growing up was that stands out to me is that the other motto, I guess, that our mother lived by was, it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. These two pictures are at Hershey Park in Pennsylvania, and then Canobie Lake in New Hampshire, respectively. As a rule-following oldest child, I was always nervous, and my mom would say, just take Todd, take him on the ride. And I would say, can I? Are we supposed to? Is he going to be okay? What if I drop him? And she said, he's going on the ride, just take him. And it always worked out. I never dropped him. And she just said, even as he got older, there are things like this that we did. And maybe I can share some more later. As we get older, I think one of the things I want to highlight is that the typical life transitions, leaving home for the first time for college or jobs, which typically result in greater distance between siblings, and resulting loss of contact and feelings of guilt. Like, all of these transitions can be harder. They can and should happen, but they can just be harder. Some siblings might want to stay close. Others might want to go as far away as possible. And, I think as siblings, that, should be respected. If there's been open communication all along, it's easier to, communicate about these things and maybe concerns you might be having as parents as you're getting older. Are you going to come back? Are you going to be around if we need you? Things like that. I used to, my best friends, my girlfriends, my now wife, like, they all got along very well with my brother Todd. And I used Todd as, kind of unconsciously. Some do it consciously, though, as a test, as a litmus test for the important people in our lives. When there are genetic concerns, whether or not you have children yourself is affected, and how you might deal with that. And so having conversations, again, early, often, let the siblings, kind of follow their lead. But having these things established when we get to some of these important life decisions is really helpful. I was worried about this aspect. I unfortunately, didn't quite get there with my brother, as I said earlier. But siblings can, are one of the concerns is this kind of club sandwich generation. If we're responsible for and caring for, or helping out in some way with aging parents, our own children, and jobs and lives, and then also our siblings with disabilities. And again, we're happy and often expecting to do this, but need information and support in all of the day-to-day stuff that you probably know and that family supports tend to focus on. Even the most family-focused providers still don't do much around siblings and don't include siblings in family supports. And we need to be at the table because we're going to be there later in life. So like I said, I think the key here is establishing open communication, neutral, value-free, judgment-free communication early and often. And then as we're all aging, parents, your children, siblings, make a plan before you need to, for whatever that entails in your family. I tried to have this conversation many times with my mother. She didn't want to burden me. She was the parent, I was the sibling. And I kept trying to convince her that I want to be involved and I expect to be. And she was adamant about that. And so even, knowing all this research and conducting my own research on siblings, I still struggle to have these conversations. But those are some of the key aspects. So what do siblings want you to know? I think, that even though we may have some concerns and may be struggling at times, I talk to parents all the time, and maybe older siblings who were involved more when they were younger, as they get older, as their sibling gets older and maybe some symptoms worsen, they're doing less and parents are feeling bad. Siblings might be feeling guilty. They still love their brother or sister, but maybe it's harder. So concerns to be acknowledged, neutral conversations. How can we connect now that things have changed? That type of approach. I want to throw out there, typical sibling behavior includes typical sibling conflict. And I hope that you're seeing this because it's a good thing. There's teasing, there's fighting, when the emotions are strongest, there are highs and lows, right? It's when it's kind of neutral that you should be worried, because maybe the sibling, your child without a disability, isn't sure what to do, or is feeling less emotion, less connection in some way, so that it's a good thing. I remember in one of those summers when I was our mother was on vacation and I was home with Todd. I brought him to, I'll try to say this story quickly. We were going to the Newport Folk Festival. So we had to get up early and drive there and be on time. And I had to get him ready and pack our food, our lunches and everything. And I was feeding him his breakfast, and I used to feed him with a straw, and it had to go in on one side and you had to press his lip down a little bit. And and that's what worked best. And I remember he wasn't drinking that morning. And so I tried, did some other stuff, came back, tried, didn't work. And then finally I was getting nervous about leaving. And I started getting kind of rude and yelling at him and saying, Todd, just drink. We have to go. We're going to be late. We're going to hit traffic. Todd, you have to drink. And finally I just yelled, that's it. You're not going to have any more. You're not going to have any drink this morning. We're just going. And so we went to the festival, had a great time, came back late that night. I put him in bed, and then got all squared away and was cleaning up the kitchen. And I looked at the it was a Snapple bottle. I looked at the Snapple bottle and the straw in the Snapple bottle, and I noticed that the straw had a crack in it, a big hole in it, and I tried to take a sip out of it, and I couldn't get anything. And so I ran back in there into Todd's room before he fell asleep. And I said, Todd, I just saw, I'm so sorry about the straw. I'm so sorry. And he just looked at me like with daggers, and then kind of smiled. But, you know, like that's, you know, we have our misunderstandings, our ups and downs, our fights. What else? The last thing, this is as Todd got a little older and was starting to have some health issues. But before that, even as a young adult, he wasn't quite doing what we thought he would. And we did a ton in our family. My mother and stepfather are phenomenal. And they would go camping. They had a camper, and he had a very full life, especially with us. The one thing that frustrates me and angers me is that too many people outside our family missed out on the privilege of knowing Todd. And we did a lot. He did everything we did. We figured out how to do a lot in the community and with my own friends, my other siblings' friends. At his funeral, it was amazing. All of our best friends who knew Todd through us all were there. And it was so powerful, but he didn't have his peers. And so that's one thing that still sticks with me. I can share these slides. Like I said, there are resources, the Sibling Support Project and the Sibling Leadership Network. There are books written by and for siblings. I'm happy to, there are some other resources here on the slides. My email is pretty easy. It's my initials, zsr@bu.edu. I am always happy to procrastinate my next research article by answering emails about siblings. I love it. I love it. Please, and we can do some questions now, but please feel free to reach out to me if you have questions about anything.
Thank you, Zach. I
Yeah,
love your stories.
Thanks. I know there's so many, and I'm happy to answer some questions now or talk more about my brother.
What are you currently working on right now, research-wise? What are you trying to procrastinate?
So it's more, I'm procrastinating on family involvement in IEPs.
Okay.
Not a sibling-specific project. But the next one, you know, one thing that we're trying to work on is my last project involved just a handful of sibling pairs in the research. Because a lot of the research involves just the siblings without disabilities and not the siblings with disabilities.
Okay.
So that's one thing we're trying to do, to focus on what they do together, how things have changed as they got older, et cetera.
Yeah, that's a hot topic right now, a lot, especially within our community. Thank you for sharing all your personal stories. And your website for your organization is siblingleadership.org, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yep. So lots of the research is there, and a lot of resources are there.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your help today. I appreciate your presentation. Have a great rest of your day.
All right. You too. Take care.